So hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. Just to give you a heads up, we're gonna give it about another minute, just to let everyone get situated, log in, make sure you don't have any issues. So kind of just hold tight for just a little bit. We'll cover some quick little ground rules before we get everything started. Also, you'll see a little bit of information on the slide right here. You can go ahead and review some of this information, but it will be info that I'll be covering. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. So once again, welcome everyone to the virtual college exploration for North Carolina and South Carolina students. This is sponsored by CACRAO and StriveScan all into one. Again, thank you for joining us today. So for today's session, you'll notice it's through Zoom webinar. So through webinar, you are muted and your camera is off, just to give you a heads up forward. If you have any questions, we would encourage you to put it in the Q&A box. This will allow you to interact and ask any questions to our speakers. To access the Q&A box, you'll notice it on either the top left or the bottom left side of your screen. Just press the button and you'll be able to type any kind of questions inside of there. So definitely do that to interact with it. I can say for any person speaking, it's great to hear from your students in general. Just so you know, we will have more sessions going on throughout this week and for the month as well. So definitely log into CACRAO's website. You can see it on the screen right here to see more information, and a recording of this session will be provided in about a week. So if you want to go through, you miss any information, want to go through and check it again, definitely can do that. Go into the website, it says www.cacrao.com. CACRAO is CACRAO. So very easy to find. It's a great time and a great experience for everything. For now though, I'm going to go ahead and turn over to our session for today. It's Admissions Definitions 101, and I'll be turning it over to Carrie.
Alrighty, thank you for that. I'm just gonna work on sharing my screen here and getting the presentation pulled up. Alrighty, so this is Admissions Definitions 101, just a little bit about the purpose of the presentation. It's kind of just to give an introductory course into some four-year terms that we throw around often here in admissions that you may not be familiar with as transfer students even. So we're just going to go through here, kind of explore different categories of your transfer to a four-year institution and explain some of the terminology that we use in that process. My name is Carrie Clark. I'm with Western Carolina University. I am the Assistant Director of Transfer Missions here.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexis. I am one of the undergraduate counselors for Columbia College.
My name is Sterling Woodruff. I'm one of the admissions counselors at Brevard College.
Alrighty. Moving on to kind of the organization of how this presentation is going to go. I've broken it up into 5 different categories just for ease of flowing. We're going to cover general university terms, just terms you'll hear when explaining institution types, financial aid, kind of the basics about financial aid and scholarship opportunities, admissions, those definitions directly linked to the admissions and application process. And then we've got the post-acceptance terms that you'll hear after an admission decision has been made. And then finally, your final steps regarding enrollment and registration concerning transferable credits.
Okay, so we're going to start with the first section, general university. These are a few terms that you're going to hear typically at the four-year college university level, rather than your two-year community colleges and your technical schools. Starting off with defining the difference between a private and public institution. The most overall difference that you will typically see is that institutions will differentiate in funding and where that is streamlined. So private institutions, you will typically see that funding comes heavily from their students, which is what we call a tuition-based. They will also have endowments and everything from their alum. So that's where a lot of their revenue is streamed from, is from the tuition. There's really no difference in the in-state and out-of-state residency, which I'll explain that next. And lastly, typically private institutions are a little bit smaller than your public institutions, which public, you're going to see a little bit of a larger student body, and then their revenue comes heavily from the government, from the state. So you'll typically hear questions, or students may ask, is this a state school? Are you part of the state system? And public institutions, like I said, are run by the state, so they do have certain requirements that they do have to follow in order to continue to receive that funding. And then of course there is a difference in funding for tuition based on residency. And so moving on to what is residency? A few students who are in state means that you are living in the same state as the institution, and out of state means that students are living outside of the institution. So that will typically affect how you receive funding and financial aid, which I'll cover more later on in the next session. And that will also kind of affect your cost of tuition and your cost of attendance. So next, a lot of students typically have some questions about undergraduate versus graduate. Typically, undergraduate will consist of your 2-year associate degrees and your 4-year bachelor degrees. You have a little bit more of a well-rounded in academics. You touch on all aspects depending on your institutional type, whether it's a liberal arts institution or more of a research-based institution. For graduate, you're typically seeing your post-bachelor degrees that can be at the master's and the doctoral level. You do have to have a bachelor's degree before you can pursue a graduate degree, and that will typically range anywhere between 1 to 6 years depending on the program type. Your graduate degrees are a little bit more specialized within a certain area, and many graduate degrees are a little bit more research heavy because of the specialization in the academic area. Next, we're going to kind of define what a BS, a BA, and a BFA is, and a BSBA. So a lot of students are like, oh, well, what's the difference? So a BS is a Bachelor of Science degree, typically more science and mathematical based programs. A BA degree is a Bachelor of Arts. That's typically, I say, more well-rounded in educational requirements. It's a little bit more broad in the curriculum. You're going to see a little bit more prerequisites in the area of your arts and humanities. And typically institutions will require their students to declare a minor if you are going for a BA. A BFA is a Bachelor of Fine Arts, which is heavily concentrated in the performing arts. So you'll see art majors, dance majors, theater programs that will typically fall within this realm. And then last but not least, a BSBA, that doesn't mean it's a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor of Arts degree in one. That's just a Bachelor of Science in a Business Administration degree. So that's really just more of a concentrated area. So that's not to combine into one. Next, you may hear some questions about, well, what's accreditation? So accreditation is an institution that is designed of the college and/or the program. You'll hear some institutions like they say that their nursing program is accredited by the CCNE. So that means their nursing program meets the standards of that particular accreditation agency. So there is a difference between nationally versus regionally accredited. This type of accreditation may affect how your credits transfer to another institution, which Kara will kind of touch on a little bit more when she talks about transfer credits. So there are specific regions in the US that have accreditation agency, like for example, CACRAO is typically within the SACs, falls in that accreditation agency, which has all of the southern region, such as like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, all those states. So it's more important to see how some institutions are accredited, because some of those institutions or businesses, depending on what you do postgraduate, will look at your degree and which institution it's accredited by. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about financial aid. So we're going to hear some terms of what discusses financial aid, or what are you discussing during financial aid process, scholarships, grants, and loans. So we're going to differentiate between that. First things first, what is financial aid? It's money that is given or loaned to you to help pay for college. It will typically come from the federal or the state, some private organizations like nonprofit organizations, but it's basically, I like to think of it as financial assistance to help lower the cost of attending. Loans are money that is borrowed, so you will have to pay this money back, and it does accrue interest. There are different types of loans like subsidized, unsubsidized, private loans, and the difference that will differentiate between those types of loans is just basically how the interest accrues on that and how much interest may occur. Typically, we try to defer students from going to private loans because those interest rates are a lot higher. So we always encourage students, of course, to go for the grants and the scholarships. We'd like to say that's more of the quote unquote free money. The source of that is just where the difference is where the source of the money comes from. A grant doesn't have to be paid back, and that's typically on the need-based. So for example, when students file their FAFSA, they may qualify for the Pell Grant, which is the grant that's given to students based on financial need. Scholarships are a little bit different. So it's once again kind of falls underneath the term of free money, but scholarships are a little bit more based on merit. And by merit, we'll explain that a little bit more in depth, but merit is basically kind of your academic standards. So you might have to meet a certain GPA requirement, or you might meet certain SAT or ACT scores. Some scholarships are based on scholarship, and some scholarships are also based on just general interests. Next, we're going to talk what the FAFSA is. So a lot of students, you know, you will hear the term of, oh, well, make sure you apply for the FAFSA, make sure you apply for the FAFSA. And students are like, well, what is this? So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. You can receive, or we do encourage you guys to submit this, and it will help you receive financial assistance. It's typically filed once every year for each school year. So the 2021-2022 school year FAFSA opened up actually October 1st, and that is now open to submit. We always encourage students to sit down with your parent or guardian, simply because it's going to ask for their tax and income information if you're filing as a dependent. If you're filing as an independent, that will be a little bit different. That's more so just you alone. But if you're still as a dependent, we typically say try to do it with your parent or guardian. This document is required to submit if you want to receive financial aid, work study, or loans, but it's not a requirement, but it's strongly recommended to students and their families because the cost of college is so expensive. Once you submit the FAFSA, there is what we call an EFC, which is basically your expected family contribution. And that's generated through a formula that the government has decided magically what that is. So we don't really know what that formula is, but you'll hear that term EFC. And so based on the EFC, your college will typically see that and see, okay, well, hey, what do they need for, what do they need for financial aid? What do they need in terms of financial assistance? The government will also go based off your EFC in terms of what grants and scholarships you may qualify for. You also want to make sure that you put in your school's school code, so then that way that institution will receive your FAFSA. And each school has a specific school code, which we can all put ours in there if you'd like at the end if needed. But next, we're going to kind of differentiate between scholarships. So scholarships have different types as well. There's internal scholarships, regional scholarships, and then there's more of the state and federal granting scholarships. Starting with internal scholarships, this is typically by the institution, and they may have certain endowed scholarships through their alumni network. They're typically merit-based, but some are service-based and need-based, but there are certain qualifications typically for mainly all of them. When you see regional scholarships, this could be more so based on organizations and businesses within certain areas. So for example, there could be churches that provide scholarships, or I know like Chick-fil-A oftentimes has scholarships for their student employees. So you'll see organizations that fall within certain regions. And then next you see the state and the federal scholarships. So those are more so government-based. Each state may have a lottery scholarship, like South Carolina has the Palmetto Fellows, the Hope and the Life. Then I know North Carolina has the North Carolina Hope Scholarship. But the federal scholarships are typically based on majors and programs. So there are specific majors that may qualify for certain financial federal government scholarships. Next, kind of you heard me say the term merit. So we're going to kind of discuss a little bit about what need-based versus merit-based is. Basically, need-based just means that money that is awarded to you based on your need for funding, while merit is more so based on the standards that are met academically, and sometimes even based on your talents or your interest in your programs. So like I said, it's always important to make sure that you're submitting those test scores or submitting, getting so your GPA is where it needs to be, and that way you're receiving those scores based on merit. A lot of schools are doing test optional this year because of COVID. So they might ask for additional supplemental documents to offset the requirements of the SAT or the ACT. And last portion, you'll hear this term cost of attendance. So in conclusion, when you put everything together in terms of your financial aid for school, that calculates your cost of attendance. Your cost of attendance includes your tuition, your fees, your campus living, like your residence life, and then any additional expenses that may come into factor. So you may have like a lab fee for a biology class, which will fall underneath the fees, or you may have a technology fee. You may have the healthcare and counseling services fee. So some institutions even have a postal fee because of your campus mailbox. So then those are like the fees that you'll see that are added onto your tuition, which your tuition is just basically the cost of your classes and the cost of your academics. So what does it take, or how much money does it cost in order to attend that institute or learn there? There's also campus living expenses. So you'll hear your room and board, which is basically the cost of your residence hall dorm and your meal plans. And then the other costs that are factored into your cost of attendance is an estimation for books and supplies, your basic living needs. Maybe transportation costs are included in this, or if there's a campus shuttle, do you have to pay for that? Gas that you'll need to get home. So all those are factored into your cost of attendance. This number can be very large at first, and we always like to call it the sticker price. But once you add in your potential financial aid award and your grants, this number will typically decrease. But that's the financial aid in the general terms in a nutshell. It's a little complex, but of course, we're always here for questions, and Carrie will kind of take us on to the admission steps.
Alrighty, thank you for that. So just moving on into the admissions process, or the admissions section here, going through everything that you'll hear in the application and admission phase. So we are going to go ahead and start with dates and deadlines. These are absolutely critical when it comes to the admission process. Each university is different with their dates and deadlines, so be sure you are in communication with the admissions office concerning what dates do I need to have everything in by. Some schools will have what's called hard application deadlines, so that is deadlines where all documents must be received by. Those are usually not very flexible. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got rolling admission. So there's no real set date. They may have a date where they suggest that you have materials in by, however, they will continue reviewing and accepting applications until their next entering class is all full. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about the admission requirements. So you'll hear a lot of institutions talk about admissions requirements, and I've listed 3 main ones that we tend to look at for transfer students in particular. Some institutions will have a minimum GPA. Of course, your GPA meaning your grade point average. This is on a 4.0 scale for college coursework. And then you've got a cumulative GPA that they'll look at, and also a term GPA. Now, the cumulative GPA is just all of your grades that you have previously taken, kind of calculated into one big GPA of all your academic history. And then you have your term GPA, which is just based on one semester. So a college will look at your cumulative GPA and also sometimes your most recent term GPA, and that will factor into grade pattern history. Grade patterns is just the history of your grades. So we tend to, in admissions for acceptance, we tend to look at students who are improving over time with their grades or remaining consistently doing well. So your most recent semester coursework may factor in a little bit heavier. And of course, that is dependent on the institution. lastly, we'll kind of take into account academic standing. So this is just your eligibility to return to your previous institution. We want to make sure that you don't have suspension or probation. There are methods of admission in that regard. However, you want to make sure your academic standing is good, if at all possible. Next up, kind of applications. There's actually different types of applications that you'll complete. And of course, the application is just a form that you'll complete if you're interested in attending a certain college. So you'll hear the term common application or common app. This is just one application to apply to any of the participating universities. Currently, there are 909 colleges that participate in the common app. So it's just one application you'll fill out, and you can go down the list and send that application off to each college that participates in that. And this is both for first year and transfer applicants. So that's an excellent resource. If that matters to you, definitely ask your institution if they accept the common application. I know it provides a lot of ease in that application process if they can just hit apply and go from there. There's also individual applications that may be required. So this is an application that must be completed through the school's own website. Usually that institution does not accept any other type of application. So you have to complete their application through their website. And then more uncommonly, I guess there is a shared system application occasionally. So depending on the state, some state schools will share one general application. So for instance, I'm not sure that there's one in North Carolina, I don't believe so. But for instance, if there were, you would apply using a shared system application, and that would go to all of the UNC constituent institutions. So that would go to Western Carolina, NC State, things of that sort. But just keep an eye out on those different application terms, see which institution accepts what in that process. Moving on to the application fee and waivers. So application fees are often required to aid in covering the cost of reviewing the application. This ranges usually from $20 to $90. And then some colleges do not actually have an application fee at all. So be in communication with your college, see what their application fee is, and if they have any fee waivers. Fee waivers are just like a form, I guess you can waive the application fee out of the way if you meet certain qualifications. Some of those qualifications can include financial hardship. So for instance, if you qualify for a full federal Pell Grant, anything like that. We've got prior military service will sometimes qualify you for a fee waiver. It is dependent on the university, so just be in communication with them. Some universities will also participate in a free application week. So for instance, for I know specifically for freshmen, this week is free application week. So you can get an application fee waived if the university or institution is participating in that. So definitely be in contact with them, see what kind of fee waiver options are available for you in that regard. Moving on to transcripts, another big thing that we require in the admission process. I just kind of wanted to highlight the different types of transcripts that may be required. So there is an unofficial transcript. These are usually faxed, open envelope transcripts. Transcripts sent by student via email are even considered unofficial. Basically anything that can pass through the student's hands to the institution is considered unofficial. On the opposite end, you've got an official transcript. That's something that is in a sealed envelope or a secure electronic sender, such as National Student Clearinghouse. You'll hear that topic or that term come around too. Or it's just anything that has direct contact from school to school, so nothing that passes through the student's hands. And then finally, we've got the final college transcript, and that's something you'll submit after your final grades conclude. So during the application process, you may still be currently enrolled. So that's just kind of the submission of the final transcript showing all the grades that you're currently in progress, showing if you've completed an associate's degree, anything like that. That's also kind of required after you've been admitted usually. And then I just wanted to include some additional documents that you may hear, some terms that you may hear that we require in the admission process. This is things like midterm grades. So typically we refer for this as if your first semester of college, just a record of your grades around the middle of the semester. Essays and personal statements, these are sometimes prompted, specific, or open-ended. These are sometimes optional as well, or sometimes required for the application process. And then you've got letters of recommendation. So just kind of references, people who will write in and to kind of attribute to your success. Some of these may be optional or some of them may be required. Just like I said, keep that open line of communication with your admission department and see what all you'll have to submit in order to get that application reviewed. Now, after you've submitted everything, of course, comes the admission decision time. So I've listed just a few decisions here that you may hear. There's a conditional decision. So that is something like you are continued to be accepted upon successful completion of something. Occasionally, if we accept an individual who is in progress with their coursework, their decision can be contingent on successful completion of the rest of that coursework. A deferral decision is just a second review time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you've been accepted or denied. It just means we're going to review you at a later date with a different applicant pool. Early decision, you'll hear this a lot. It's a non-binding decision that occurs earlier in the year. And of course, with it occurring earlier in the year, you'll have to submit your stuff probably by a certain deadline, and you can expect a decision by a certain other date. And then as opposed to early decision, there's early action. So it's still the early decision process. However, early action is a binding decision. It requires that you enroll upon acceptance. So it's important to clarify with your institution which are they early decision or early action. And now, if you have been admitted, some programs do require a separate admission process. Now, this usually includes programs such as nursing, theater, engineering, even education. They require different deadlines, different GPA requirements. With the performing arts majors in particular, sometimes we require portfolios or auditions even. So it's important to communicate with the department and ensure that you've got the correct documentation, you're meeting the correct deadlines and meeting all the other requirements necessary for that program admission. And then some programs you also have to have prerequisites. So prerequisites is just simply a course you must complete before acceptance or before taking another course, for instance. So this is something like you can't take English 2 without English 1. You can't go into the nursing program until you've taken Nursing 101, things like that. So just be in communication with the program department that you're interested in and see if there are different admission requirements there.
Okay, hopefully by now, at this point in the process, you've been accepted to maybe your top 2 or 3 schools. So now we go to the post-acceptance part of the program. Okay, first we have the commitment. Usually colleges will have a deposit fee. Most colleges have these, and it basically bookmarks your place so that they know that you're coming. And the reason why they do this is so that it kind of helps them plan for class size, planning for what classes to offer, and housing issues. These can show up in the form of fees running from $50 to $500. And they often come with incentives such as maybe priority registration for classes or other things like that. Deadlines for these depend on the school, so it's important that you keep an eye on those deadline dates so that you don't fall behind. Orientation is pretty much like what it sounds like. You will come to your school usually before the upperclassmen do, and you'll get to learn the layout of your college. You'll meet faculty and staff. You'll get to meet your roommates. You might register for classes early. And it's just a great way to kind of get comfortable with your new surroundings before things get busy with school starting. This is at the time where you'll finish with any remaining paperwork. And it's important to get all this done and taken care of before classes start. Required documents. Okay, this is one of those times where you really do need to be prepared. You should have identification documents such as birth certificates, driver's license, vaccination records, and have those things handy because you never know when they might need something from you. Not having these documents might put you in delay, either accessing maybe your dorm room or getting a parking permit or even registering for certain classes. So all of these things are very important. You should know ahead of time maybe what meal plan you're going to choose and any requirements for your campus housing. This is not the time to surprise the college with your emotional support animal. It's up to you to be very careful that you're aware of your special needs that you might need to communicate with to the college or university so that they are prepared to have you. So you need to be in good communication with your school and especially your admissions counselor so they can tell you of any deadlines or paperwork that you might need to complete. All right. Carrie spoke a little bit about deferred decision, and I'm going to talk to you about deferred enrollment. Once you've been accepted by a college or university and you've bookmarked your place by paying that enrollment deposit fee, you might find some kind of circumstance where you need to delay entering. This could be because you're deciding to travel abroad, or you're working to save money to pay for college, or things like COVID, or just to gain time and maturity before you make the commitment to going to college. Schools have different deferment policies, and so it's very important that you learn what your college's rules and deadlines are. Let's see, there are many advantages as well to applying to college, but being and then deferring enrollment versus taking a year off and then enrolling. These benefits could be, it's easier to keep up with deadlines and requirements while you're doing all these things because your friends are all doing the same thing as seniors. And that way, when you take that time off, you're not worried about missing deadlines or paperwork. And once you leave school, it's harder to gain that momentum again. So it really is beneficial to you to go ahead and make the enrollment and then apply for deferring so that you can be prepared when you do finally enroll. So make sure that you have paid your deposits, that you have communicated well with your school. You need to do things like, when is the deadline for deferment? Do I need to provide documentation of how I spent that time off? Are there any deadlines to re-enter? And how will my deferment affect my financial aid package? And if you spend time working, how will that money affect your financial aid? So these are some very important things to consider if you're going to take some time off between school and going to college.
Alrighty, thank you for that. So switching gears into the final category here, registration and transfer credit. So how is this different? Moving on to just something that we throw around in the admissions office is articulation agreements. Essentially, this is just a partnership between two institutions that recognize credits towards a degree. It varies per institution and state. So be in communication with your admissions representative, even at the community college level. See if there's any kind of articulation agreements for an associate's degree to a bachelor's degree. Oftentimes there are. It serves as a roadmap for a plan to transfer. It just provides you that extra confidence in registering, knowing that the courses you're taking, perhaps at the community college level, are guaranteed to transfer into the four-year institution and go towards the degree of your choice. Also too, I wanted to include in here the difference between full-time and part-time enrollment. So full-time is essentially 12 or more credit hours, while part-time is 11 or less credit hours. And you may be thinking, what even is a credit hour? It's just simply a measure of how students receive credit for a course. So typically your courses will be between 3 to 4 credit hours, but that can be dependent on the course and of course the major that you're going into. And typically bachelor's degrees will be around 120 credit hours, while associate's degrees will be around 60 hours. Transfer pathways. This is somewhat similar to the articulation agreement, but this is more of a curriculum plan for associate's degrees to the bachelor degree program of your interest. It maps out more of a seamless transition. I know for my school in particular, we've got several transfer pathways for each of the programs that we offer. If you're interested in a certain major, you can clearly see how transferable credits are going to come in from an Associate of Arts or Associate of Science and play into that. Like I said, just maps out a more seamless transition. It's often tailored to the program of interest. And of course, it is dependent on the institution. So if you are interested in looking at different transfer pathways available, keep that line of communication open. Now, elective core and general education courses. This is terms that you'll hear a lot in the registration process, and I just kind of wanted to go over what each of those means. So electives are credits that are needed to graduate, but they're not necessarily related to the degree or general education courses. This is an excellent time to, if you are looking at maybe declaring a minor, elective courses are an awesome time to work towards that minor because they don't necessarily have to do with your core curriculum, and they're not general education courses, so they will fill up that elective credit portion. The core courses are courses that are directly related to your major or concentration course. So if you're a business major, it would be things like business law, things of that sort. General education, or informally known as Gen Ed or liberal study courses. These are basic college courses that are required to be studied before the major specific core courses can be taken. So these are things like your interest in Englishes, intro to biology, math, history, art appreciation even is sometimes a general education course. Just communicate with your institution of your choosing and see which transfer courses that you may have already taken. Usually it's those gen ed courses or elective credits that you'll take at a 2-year institution and transfer those into a 4-year. And speaking of transfers, there's transferable credits. Now, these are credits just earned at another institution that count for credits earned at the receiving institution. And of course, it is dependent on the college, course type, final grade, and even accreditation, as we previously mentioned. So just be in contact with both institutions, seeing which courses that you are taking can transfer in. And making sure that you are fitting that final grade, the course type requirement, and the accreditation requirement. Alrighty, and we've also got what's called a transfer evaluation here at the 4-year level. So institution will review your credits for transferability. This can be a paper form. It can be posted in an applicant portal online. It's also called a degree audit or credit evaluation. So that's just us looking over your history of courses that you've taken and seeing how they're going to transfer in and letting you know which classes they're transferring in as. There's different language at the community college and really at any institution that you go to, there's different language for the same course. So for instance, a biology course may be called Bio 101, and then in another institution, it may be called Bio 120, but it's the same course, just different numbers, different letters. So a transfer evaluation can be very helpful in determining which classes are transferring in for what. So some institutions will only do this after you apply. You'll have to fill out an application, submit your official transcripts, and have this evaluation done. Some will do what's called a preliminary credit evaluation. So this is before you fill out an application. You can see which courses that your institution of your choice is taking for what.
All right, so we've thrown a lot of terms and definitions at you. I hope you were able to use some of this to help kind of explain some of the things that you might be curious about. I want to encourage you to communicate with your admissions counselors. Their phone numbers and email addresses should be posted on their websites. And then some schools are even offering in-person admissions and financial aid meetings. But please feel free to ask questions. This is what we do, and we're happy to help because we know that this is a brand new plan for you and that you want to do it right. So we encourage you to reach out and communicate with us because we're happy to help.
Thank y'all so much. We do have a little bit of time left, about roughly 5 minutes. So we can give a quick little pause. If anyone has any questions about admissions, about any of these schools, anything, feel free to put it within the Q&A box. Again, we do have a little bit of time for that. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it within there.
And I can go ahead and put that final slide up with our contact information. as well. I'll just keep that up for you guys in case you would like to jot it down.
Just so we want to sit here in awkward silence, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the next slide really quickly. Carrie, I can take over and move this to the slide sharing. I don't want anyone to sit here in awkward silence. I understand Zoom is a little bit different. But thank you everyone for attending today's session. Hopefully you all were able to get everyone's email address in case you do have some additional questions about this session or about their particular schools. Just remember that all sessions they are recorded, so you will have access to that in a later time. You can access to that at CACRAO.org. Right when we end this meeting, it will be a quick survey link that'll pop up. Please take some time to fill it out. Your input and feedback is definitely valuable to us as we continue to make new changes and adjustments to this more virtual format. And if you are interested in more sessions, you can also sign up at CACRAO.org. Besides that, you all have a great day and enjoy yourself.